All right, everybody, welcome back to the Design Build Hunt podcast, which is presented by Whitetail Partners. Today, we're going to be breaking down a design in the southern piney woods. All right, guys, trying something just a little bit different today. It's the holidays. It's hard to get folks in the studio. And so I'm going to be flying solo today. That's all right, because I've got a topic that I've been wanting to share and discuss from one of my designs, one of my favorite properties that I have ever worked on, hoping to be back out there this year after we're able to get some logging done. But this is a southern pine tract here in Georgia. That's all I'll say. I've removed the boundary to make sure can't really tell where this property is at. But I want us to talk about some of the principles that go along with designing and hunting a southern pine timber tract. Now, there are a couple of things that make some of these properties a challenge. Number one is these are revenue producing properties. So when we think about cutting trees or doing some of the things that we would do on other properties where we go in and, cut in a half-acre bedding area, no big deal. Well, that'd be like asking a farmer if we can go cut down half an acre of his corn, right? So there's a automatically we have some restrictions, right, as to what we can and cannot accomplish. On the back of that, oftentimes we're relying on logging crews and large scale logging operations to accomplish some of the work that we need done on a property. For instance, once an area, let's say, has shaded out, those pines get 7, 8, 9 years old, and the understory is shaded out. It's no longer quality cover. It's no longer providing quality forage. What do we do? Well, oftentimes we have to wait until that stand is 15, 14, 12 to 15 years old, somewhere in there, when they're going to come in and do their first thinning, depending on how productive the site is. Anywhere from 12 to 16 years old, you're going to get that first thinning done. And so oftentimes you need a larger track to be just a little bit patient. Now, there are some things that we can do to get around that, and we'll talk about that in this episode, or potentially a whole other episode, maybe later on. But I think this episode is going to have enough for itself. So, but I want to talk about, for all you guys hunting down here in the South, what can we do to manage timber like this, to manage a property like this, to design a property like this? Because let me tell you, when you are hunting a pine timber tract, visibility is an issue. We don't get to watch deer at 200 and 300 yards in stands like this. 50 yards, 100 yards, maybe on a good day, depending on how recently it was thinned. But visibility is a problem. So we got to make sure, what are we doing to manage these well? So there's a couple of tactics that we're using. So this is a property. Hopefully, this one is going to be getting cut soon for its, I believe, second thinning prior to doing major clear cuts down the road, or not major clear cut, but major thinning afterwards. We're never going to actually clear cut this property, but that's a whole other episode in itself. But a couple of things that we're doing. So we're actually going to thin this entire portion. This is one of the pine stands on the property. There's a lot of different pine stands on this piece. This is about a 600-acre parcel. And as you can see, we're going to have some very strategically placed food plots that lay out by by their hunter access. Now, these are not roads that we're driving all the time, and so not a big deal to have stands right there on the road, because these roads will be used only when they're going in there to hunt that. But you'll notice here we have large sections of these pines in green and large sections of these pines in orange. So you might wonder, what in the world is going on there? Well, orange for us is typically a bedding block, and green for these pine tracts like this, I am using for what is primarily like a staging or forage production area. Notice we've got these food plots spread out pretty well. And in the core of them, right here in the middle of them, we've got this large orange bedding area right here. What are we doing with that? Well, within this stand, it is going to be thinned all at once, because you're not going to get a logging crew to come out and do a small project, right? It's just not cost effective for them. So what's going to happen is a logging crew is going to come out. They're going to thin this entire section right here. Once this section is thinned, we are going to begin then to manage this area through the use of prescribed fire. Now, there's lots of good podcasts, lots of good YouTube videos that talk about the use of prescribed fire. I won't go into too much detail for this episode, but suffice it to say, prescribed fire is the number one most important tool that we are using typically here in the South for habitat and wildlife management. It is the most important thing that we've got. So once we've got this area completely thinned, we're going to come in and cut a fire break here, and we're going to cut a fire break here. Then we will use our road system as fire breaks around the entire edge. Then we'll have the creek as our fire break along this side over here. Now, once that is done, we are going to leave this section alone for quite some time. We're actually about a year after thinning, we'll come through. We'll probably burn the whole thing about a year after thinning. But then after that initial thinning, we're not going to burn this section in here for probably 3.5, maybe even 4 years. Again, we're keeping a close eye on the productivity of the site. Guys who are thinking about prescribed burns, always let the plant response tell you when that property or when that stand is ready to be burned. We're going for a specific structure. So the structure that we're looking for in here is shrubby, some woody component, lots of forbs, some mix of native grasses, hopefully about 35%, 40% native grasses in here. So we are looking in here for a, tall, dense, somewhat woody section to provide high quality cover. Now, these sections on the outside here that are nearest to the food plots and furthest away from or further away from this bedding, we're going to burn these areas on this site about every 18 months. And you say, well, why are we staggering that burn every 18 months? Well, the goal of an 18-month burn is going to be, so we'll have a February dormant season burn, and then the next time around we're going to be burning that in early or maybe even late fall. 18 months give or take, right? We're not necessarily going to stick to 18 months. And again, we're letting the plant community tell us. But for these green sections, the primary objective here is to have a structure that is primarily browse, right? We want lots of forbs on the ground. We want to have a lot of deer food. We want things like greenbrier growing. We want some American beautyberry potentially in there, which is a secondary food choice, but a food choice nonetheless. We want lots of ragweed popping up. We want some, oh goodness, I can't think of the name of it. I think I said greenbrier already. What's the name of that other one? My goodness, brain farts happen, guys. When you're trying to rock solo, it can be pretty tough. But anyway, the primary driver here is to have forage on the outside. So we're structuring it like this so that our cover is towards the core of this management unit on this property. We've got a 4.5 acre food plot here, a 1.25 acre food plot here, and almost 3/4 of an acre food plot down here going on. We can come in, hunt these deer very effectively, staying to the outside edges of this management unit. Our wind is never blowing back up into this cover when we hunt this, right? Because we're hunting T2, let's say, we're going to have our wind blowing back out this direction. If we're hunting B11, then we're in a little bit of trouble. We've got to be very strategic, but we're typically going to be trying to blow our wind right back down this little funnel right here in these hardwoods, which these hardwood drainages, yeah, they do get some deer movement, not a ton of daylight deer movement though in these types of areas. Lots and lots of nighttime movement. Unless there's a bumper acorn crop, then we have no business sitting on this food plot anyway. We need to be in here in the hardwoods. But so the idea is deer bed within this orange bedding block because it's got more dense cover. And we're going to be burning these blocks every so often, maintaining structure of early, plants that are going to be forage. Stumbling over my words there just a little bit. So how do we then build a hunting strategy based on that? So hunting strategy is going to begin, first of all, we have some low impact stand locations like T2. We're a good bit off of this bedding cover. So this would put me 140 yards from the very edge from what would be the fire break here. 140 yards outside of that bedding cover, well within the range of what a buck could hit on his way to this food plot if he's leaving this bedding block here and on his way to this food plot up here to the north of T2. Notice on there, we've got our mock scrape and water hole, just like always. Notice we also have travel corridors cutting through here. When you have created high quality cover like this in the middle and a dense area out here with lots of forage that's growing up, knee to waist high somewhere in there, when you cut a travel corridor into that, these become absolute major deer highways. Guys in the South, listen up. We have opportunities here with the travel corridors to have a ton of success, especially because of how thick it gets down here. Deer can walk wherever they want to. Our goal is to give them a better option. And these travel corridors very, very quickly become that better option. So, we've got a water hole here right in the middle of all this great forage, just outside of bedding and on the way to the food plot. Essentially, what we've done is create a design staging area. Again, another great spot to slip in the morning. Come in, deer still hopefully out there feeding in our food plots or very, very close to the edges of the food plots. They've not made their way necessarily back into bed yet. We're going to slip right in here, get here between this food plot and between this bedding location. We've also leveraged in this design these rows in between where we are cutting our fire breaks. I want my fire breaks to be fairly straight because oftentimes I want to use them for a hunting opportunity. These edges right here create some of the very best predictable deer movement during the daylight hours, even during midday. What you'll often see is deer traversing from one side to the other, 10:30 in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Oftentimes just hopping up, getting out of this section right here, coming over here, browsing just a bit, and going back up into the bedding cover. Very, very common. So we want to have tree stand locations along those fire breaks where these edges are. And I've heard others describe this as kind of a checkerboarding effect, as you'll notice. We've got a checkerboard effect. And notice we are hunting on those edges that we have created in what would otherwise be a monotonous pine stand, right? This is all even age pine timber right here. They come in, they thin it. If guys come in and you just burn this whole thing, every 2 years or whatever, which is kind of the standard down here, they come in, they burn the whole block every 2 years. Well, then it's still just monotonous. It's still the same thing all the way across. It's still homogeneous cover or food, probably not doing either one very well. If we break it up like this, though, into smaller management units, let's see how big this bedding block is here. So that is a 9-acre bedding block right here, just about perfect in pine timber. Obviously, very different from some of the quarter-acre bedding blocks that we cut in by hand. That's a whole different topic. But 9-acre bedding block, large forage blocks, hunting either within the forage areas or just on the edge of these bedding locations where they set up well for a good hunting opportunity. Notice right over here, we've got the same thing going on. Got a bedding block on this east side of the creek. We've got forage on this west side of the creek and a food plot here. The best deer crossing of this creek on this entire property was right here. We're managing with fire. 3 to 4 year rotation over here, 18-month to 2 year, maybe 30-month, depending on the productivity of the site. Again, it's all about the structure. It's all about the plant community response. I don't care about the timing of the fire. What I care about is what the plant community is telling me and when the plant community says it's time to burn again. I don't care about the time period necessarily. But T5, great location catching deer, crossing this crossing right here out of this bedding area or back into this bedding area in the morning hours. If we zoom out a little bit again, you're going to see the same thing played out over here. This is one of my favorite corners of this property. I absolutely love this section right here. You may have been following me on Instagram. About a year ago, I was standing in a location and I'd found an old tree stand and I took a picture of it and I posted it to Instagram and I said, hey, I've heard when you find these old stand sites, you should pay attention. And I'm literally squatting down, typing something in and I hear something coming. I'm standing right up in here. I hear something coming and I look up and it's a buck. He trots right along in here. I'm like, okay, well, I guess this old timer that hung this old stand did know what he was doing. So I go back and I start to record myself to say, wow, there was a buck just came through here. And another buck comes through, cruises on the same trail about 3 minutes later. Like, okay, this is pretty interesting here. So got a little bit of video of him. Then again, a minute or two later, another buck comes through. He kind of cuts this direction, right through here. So automatically knew we've got to be doing something right here. But these pines again are going to be thinned. We're going to be managing them very similar to the other side. We've got a nice bedding block right here. We have a forage designed staging location here. We've got a tree stand way on the outside, mock scrape with a camera right here. And again, very strategically placed travel corridors running through the bedding cover from this small food plot over here and another major deer crossing there, an improved deer crossing that we're actually going to beef up a little bit. Travel corridor all the way through this bedding area, all the way across to this large 4.8 acre food plot here, which is I believe was standing beans last summer. Not sure what they're going with this fall, but major corridor action right here. Again, we're watching this edge as deer step out of this denser, thicker cover into more open, but still somewhat dense, somewhat thick. They still feel very comfortable in there because it's about, knee to waist high on us. But certainly from a 16-foot tall ladder stand out here, you can get a shot down into this area, this mock scrape right here. Same thing going on over here. And you'll notice we're keeping these perpetually as bedding locations. Now, somebody may say, well, yeah, but if you burn every 3 or 4 years, you're going to, you're going to have some sweet gums and some other hardwood encroachment in there, and you're going to have to go in and use some herbicide. And you're exactly right. But what I don't want to do is manage with fire often enough to keep that stuff out totally in here, because if I do that, I'm going to have to rotate it with this one eventually, this larger bedding block over here to the east. I don't want to rotate it with that bedding block. I want the bedding to always be over here and always be over here. So it's worth it to us to have a skidder come out every, I don't know, 12 years to come out and spray out some of the sweet gums. But if we're strategic with when we do burn these blocks, I think we'll be able to keep those, that hardwood encroachment at bay. At least we have on other sites. So, but you'll notice here, again, T9 right here on this edge. This is more of an archery setup over here. This hunter wanted some archery locations as well as some rifle locations. So here we are, archery location, mock scrape on the way to this large food plot. Got a big design staging area here that he'll be able to see from his blind. He'll be able to see probably 150 yards up into right here from that blind right there. So lots of opportunities here. And again, we're just creating staging areas. Now we start to ask the question, what do we do with our hardwoods then? First of all, for a lot of these properties, as you very well may know, oftentimes the hardwoods are just very, very difficult to hunt. The thermals are probably going to get you in the evenings, which is when you'd be wanting to hunt them most likely anyway. You can hunt them in the mornings, certainly, and have some success doing that, but it is very, very difficult. But we are going to be doing some hardwood management. That's what you see here in this brown section. So this brown section is going to be an oak tree release section. There was a stand of really good white oaks. Now, this property's got a lot of hardwoods, but not a lot of good acorn producing white oak trees. You get down in here, it's a lot of tulip poplar, it's a lot of sweet gum, it's a lot of just kind of junk hardwood, maybe some water oaks scattered in there, but not high quality hardwoods. Over here, though, we do have a stand of white oaks. And notice, once again, we've strategically placed our bedding block so that it is right next to these white oaks. It's not way over here where we can't get to it. It's not way up in here where it's right up against our food plot. We're off the food plot just a little bit to protect our access, but at the same time, we can come in from the backside. If the acorns are raining, which they are this year, free up these oak trees within here, let their canopies expand so that they can produce more acorns so that we get a better crop. And better crop in here means the deer are more likely to be feeding within here. Same thing down here on this southern portion. Notice we've got our bedding tucked back in towards the back. Our access is from the east over here. So we've got our strategically placed staging areas that we are burning every 18 months, 24 months, 20 months, somewhere in there, whatever the plant community response tells us. And this is where we're hunting. We're catching that buck on this mock scrape coming out of bedding rather than relying on always catching him within this food plot. So let's talk about some of the challenges that go along with hunting a pine stand, or maybe some of the mistakes or misconceptions. When I come out to a pine stand like this, I often have people tell me, hey, This is great. We've got all the cover in the world. And I get there and it's a stand of 9-year-old pine trees. What they mean when they say thick cover is a bunch of trees really, really close together. That's not high quality cover. High quality cover is there is, yes, a high stem count component, but there's also going to be a food component too. It's going to be thick, but not too thick. It's going to get sunlight to the ground, unless we're talking about, maybe some summertime thermal cover or something like that. But that's a whole different ball game. So misconceptions: number one, just because it's thick means it's good bedding. Totally not true. Not at all the case. The other one is, hey, we can't do anything, with these pines. We just they're going to come in, they're going to log when they log, get some sunlight to the ground, and there's nothing else that we can do. Wrong. We can manage very closely with prescribed fire and be very careful to create forage where we want forage. Be very careful to create bedding where we want bedding. And as long as we stay on top of our rotations, that's the key here. As long as we stay on top of our rotations with that, then then we will be able to manage these appropriately on into the future. These stands are going to be just like this. As long as we keep these fire rotations with fire coming back at the right time, we're going to have the plant community response in here that we're looking for. We're going to have predictable hunting. Now, as you back out just a little bit, you might be thinking, okay, so do I burn all of this? Okay, so let's say I burn this every 3 years. I burn both of these. We're going to make sure to be staggering these. So we're going to burn this one 1 year. Maybe a year and a half later, we're going to burn this one. And, when we're burning, same thing with these forage blocks here. We're going to be burning this one. 8-9 months later, we're going to burn this one. We're going to keep them staggered so that we never have, you know, charred ground for as far as the eye can see. We always want to have some element of cover and some element of food and forage being produced, although they spring back very, very quickly. If you're familiar with these southern pine stands and what happens in here, once you get sunlight on the ground, they're going to spring back really, really quickly anyway. So let's see, anything else interesting about this design? I think that's about it. Again, one of my favorite properties. Just wanted to touch briefly on southern pine properties, southern pine plantations. If you've got southern piney woods and you're having trouble getting rid of your timber, or you're having trouble deciding what to do with your timber, or man, it just feels like it's gotten away from you, give me a call. Reach out to us on our website, whitetailpartners.com. I would love to be able to help. Have a good week, guys.